Hi there, I'm Angus Wright, and I also go by Angus By Design. And this is another day in a personal spiritual practice which I call a Satsang for One. Essentially, what I do is I listen to an episode of the Be Here and Now podcast featuring Ram Dass. I write some notes in a journal, and then I write some quotes in a physical journal, and then I take an animal oracle deck and I pull a card that I use for inspiration for that day's reflections. And I do all of this as part of my personal wellness recovery action planning, part of my daily maintenance, and part of just keeping myself grounded using the tools that I know work for me. So today, today's podcast that I listened to was about generosity. So, generosity, generous with love, generous with compassion, generous with wisdom. And that's a quote by Ram Dass. Our motivations. I wanted to share with people. I wanted to share the joy of this. We had only politicians, actors, or business people as our models. And it was Maharaji, and now we could take a new step. And that's Ram Dass in speaking about his motivations behind sharing what he had learned on his pilgrimage to India and the unconditional love that he experienced through his guru, Maharaji. Generous act is so much ego. Like, I'm generous. It's an act of the ego, Ram Dass says. So, Maharaji's gifts: love, unconditional love, that we are free to expand. We need a guru. It takes the pressure off. I'm not the captain of the ship. He's the captain of the ship. It's trusting a father figure. Father, mother. That controlling business is fear, and you can give it up once you have a guru. Ram Dass. Living from the heart. This is regarding turning journey into another form of materialism. Live as if the oneness was real. All of the things are one. Live not inwards, go beyond words, or go behind words and thoughts. If spirituality were a thought, then love it and be the loving witness. Like yoga, these words have a life of their own. Words are spiritual materialism, like mala beads. We focus on the means or the path, and the path usually has materialism to it. So it's sort of referencing the attachment we have to things like religion and spirituality in general, and sort of like the methods that we use in order to obtain our spiritual path. I perceive myself and the universe differently. My perception is tinged with love. I must be careful not to love with my ego. In my mind, they should receive love and I should give it to them. And I'm doing it out of my mind. And it's whether I should give it to them rather than Maharaji. Give it to them. I'm the worm at the end of the fishing pole that Maharaji is throwing out. Generosity. And then unconditional love, truth, compassion, and trust. Nurturing perception tinged with love. That leads to a self-concept. You become a loving person. You work from that. No angry person, but a loving person. And Larry's comment when he said, "When I sit before Maharaji, I know he's a saint that loves people. But at that time, I look around and I love people." And that's Larry Brilliant that he's referring to, who wrote a book called Sometimes Brilliant, which they recommend Ram Dass and Raghu Marcus, who run the podcast. That's the book they recommend. And the last quote from the lecture that stood out was Ram Dass saying, "Ram, Ram, I love you all." And his actions proved it time and time again. So I'm going to channel that information and those quotes. I'm going to tie in all the thoughts and feelings and reflections that I had during listening to the lecture today. And we'll see what the animal oracle has to sort of input. And I love using this as a tool for reflection. It's kind of a wonderful experience to feel connected to the source, right? The source, the universal source that everybody can access and is part of. The source that goes above and beyond anybody's idea of what is and what will be. Okay. I feel like this is the one. Rhino Spirit, overcome any obstacle. Beautiful rhino. Okay. Let's see what Rhino Spirit has to say. So Rhino Spirit, overcome any obstacle. The Oracle message. We always have the choice to press ahead, and Rhino Spirit's strength offers you the power to break through stubborn obstacles. This animal spirit knows that there is more than one way to open a path to what you seek. When Rhino Spirit appears, you are reminded that you have a marvelous ability to overcome obstacles in multiple ways, by going around them, shattering them with the force of clear, deliberate intentions, or even transforming them into clouds that drift away by refusing to allow them to limit you. Apply your Rhino Spirit with creativity, and no obstacle can stand, for you have magic to make and many ways in which to make it. Your power is awesome right now. Rhino Spirit also wants to remind you that when an obstacle appears to prevent you from getting what you desire today, it means that something much better is coming. Keep that in mind when you consider the nature of the obstacle in front of you now. Great Spirit loves you so much and only wants the best for you. The protection message behind the Rhino Spirit. The appearance of an obstacle in front of you offers you a choice. Barrel into it and bang your head, or find your easiest way around it and don't fight it. Are you exhausted by your efforts to break through an obstacle? Are you stubbornly insisting that there is only one way to remove it from your path? Rhino Spirit is here to tell you that sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes it is no, not yet. And sometimes it is no, not the way you think it should be. Open to new possibilities, and you will find other options begin to appear. Not every conflict is worth engaging in, and not every obstacle is worth resisting head on. Don't waste energy banging your head against the wall. Rhino Spirit. Wow. I can completely relate. I often describe that feeling as coming in like Miley Cyrus on a wrecking ball, which always gives a really cute visual, I think, in my head. I love that message. I love the idea of just thinking of everything as a path, right? You know, if you've ever walked in the forest and you see a tree falling over the path, what do? Right? It really honestly depends on the obstacle. Sometimes that's where your path turns back and you start to retrace your steps. Sometimes that obstacle is smaller and you can simply step over it or remove that obstacle so that other people on that path can access it more freely. You know, sometimes we live in bodies that create more obstacles and more barriers to overcome those one-off situations. I just really love the idea of marrying what Ram Dass was talking about, which is basically just sort of like, you know, he speaks to receiving unconditional love from Maharaji and then getting caught up in the materialism of his own spirituality, wanting to project that outwards, right? And he often talks about his relationship to being a therapist and how often his motivation in that moment, his intention may have been the same, to help and support and love people, but the motivations behind it, the reasons behind it, are often more based in materialism, right? So I just love that the Rhino is all about not barging through, but perhaps looking for other ways around or through those obstacles. And sometimes just looking at like the idea that sometimes the answer is no, sometimes the answer is not yet, sometimes the answer is yes but another way, right? Or no, but if you come back with another solution, perhaps it'll come to fruition. My favorite quote is Ram Ram, I love you all, right? Because just in that quote, the message is that we're all connected to one, right? We're all connected to one energy that makes us the same. And I often reflect and say that we are spirits and souls having a human experience. So it's really quite wonderful to be able to see that in all other forms of life, because it, in my world, it leads to experiencing love in a deeper way. So that's today. Namaste.